This is Machynlleth in Powys, mid Wales. It sits at a strategically important location on the Cambrian railway line from Shrewsbury. It is close to the junction for Aberystwyth in one direction, and the Cambrian coastline rounds to Tywyn, Barmouth, Porthmadog and Pwllheli in the other. I've come to Machynlleth to meet Network Rail for two reasons. First, to see the works underway in a major 17-day blockade on the route between here and Newtown. But I've also come to hear about, as well as see firsthand, an exciting initiative underway between Transport for Wales, Network Rail and other stakeholders that they are calling Local Railway. And it could just be the solution that the architects of Great British Railways are looking for. Chris Pearce is the Value Management Director for Network Rail's Wales and Western region. I asked him, what is Local Railway?
In simple terms, it means bringing together and integrating the parts of the railway across track and train at a geographical area that makes sense to colleagues and to customers. So we're trying to integrate the railway system as close to customers as possible and empower those teams working together to do the right things for the customer, looking across traditional boundaries and divides to improve things for customers like performance, the service that they receive, and to improve the overall net subsidy for running the railway. And what we've found is that by colleagues working horizontally across those traditional divides, they're able to achieve things that weren't deemed possible before.
So you'll have people excited at the idea of managing down net subsidy, the idea of bringing everything together in a single P&L. Just give us some practical examples then of how that has made a net subsidy difference, that approach here.
Yeah. So when we first got this team together here in Machynlleth on the Cambrian, the thing they told us immediately was, given that the railway was so seasonal, the best thing that they could do was deliver additional capacity during those peak summer months. And so they looked at ways in which they could do that. And it seemed that for many, many years, over a decade, in fact, that wasn't possible on the Cambrian coast. They could only run train lengths that were 2 cars in length. But within a matter of weeks, they identified all of the blockers that needed removing and found ways to overcome those blockers, often perceived, to find ways to do that. And that summer, they were able to deliver additional capacity, which was great for customers, but also for the colleagues working on that bit of railway. And in the end, it impacted in a way that meant that revenue went up by over 20% during that period. So it was good for customers, good for colleagues, and good for their bottom line.
So we're here at this fairly substantial blockade on the Cambrian Line between Newtown and Machynlleth. There's quite a lot of work going on. Has the local railway concept been applied here? And if so, what kind of difference has it made? Has it changed the way you've done this?
Yes, it has. And I think this is a really good example. So this was going to be a traditionally quite cost-effective track renewals job. But when the team started talking about it, because it's going to have a big impact on their part of the network, they said, well, how could we make it even better? So they looked at what other work could be encompassed within the blockade. They looked at how they could deal with customers and what the best way of keeping those customers moving through a bus operation that you'll see here today. And they looked at the other additional benefits in association with cost avoidance of having to do interventions on the track that would have otherwise needed to be done. And so the overall impact of looking at it whole system has been, they've been able to deliver more work, more cost effectively. Overall, the railway over the control period will be closed for fewer days, I think 8 days in total less. And the net financial impact has been in the region of about £1.5 million, which is a lot of money anyway, but for this bit of railway, it's a significant amount to be saving.
To make something like a blockade work for customers, it requires a tremendous collaboration between the operators of track and train. It's here that Local Railway has really shown its value, with a remarkable replacement bus operation, totally focused on the customer. Colin Lee is Planning and Performance Director for Transport for Wales. So this is a blockade of around 3 weeks, and we've closed a whole section of railway, but clearly, passengers, customers still want to keep moving. So what's been put in place? Give us an idea of the scale of what you've done.
This is the power of the local railway. So we've come together as both Network Rail and TfW as the operator to work out a plan which gives customers kind of an obvious way forward, a clear way forward, great signage, clear, consistent bus operation. But that's a very significant operation. So we've had about 40 different operators, and the bus that's just come past us a minute ago has come from Walsall. We've got Lloyd's coaches here in Machynlleth who help us a lot with this, but we need to take a huge pool of operators, like 40, and about 2,000 bus movements. So it's a huge operation. It depends on great staff on the ground helping people, good signage. We've improved that at all the station stops along the way, and that opens the door to allow us to close the railway for basically 16 days.
So 2,000 bus movements with 40 operators. I suppose a daft question really is, why does it need so many operators? Is it just because there's so many that you just need to draw it from multiple sources?
Well, there's one slight oddity, which one of the main roads around here is actually closed at the moment as well. So we need a mix of both smaller buses that can cope with the mountain roads and also the larger coaches, and they all need to be compliant with the accessibility regulations, so they have lifts for wheelchairs, etc. And so we do need to go in quite a wide pool, and of course we're here in rural mid Wales, so there aren't that many bus operators in the locality either.
So that's an interesting point about accessibility. If I've a passenger that requires assistance, how do I go about telling you that I need that? Is there a way of pre-booking it, or do you just turn up and it's
well, you can of course turn up,
right.
But we really encourage people to pre-book, and the pre-booking system's really good. There's an app and there's a website which you can do, and you can also call in. And the team here, who have been absolutely brilliant at this, literally go through that 6 a.m. in the morning, print off the list, give it to the coordinators behind us, and we look after all of those customers. And so far we've only actually had one complaint during this whole operation.
I was going to ask, so the passenger reaction's been very positive, just one complaint out of 2,000 bus movements. That's very impressive.
And because we've been able to package it up in a way that you can easily communicate to customers.
Yeah.
Some people have chosen to wait and perhaps travel in a couple of weeks' time, but actually most people are still travelling and are having a good experience when they do.
And what about revenue? Because one of the challenges of bus replacement is that it can become a bit of a revenue holiday. Have you been able to overcome that a bit?
Has been a challenge. Where we've done this before, we've had a real challenge with that. And when we had the Barmouth blockades a few years ago to do the bridge and the viaduct, we did struggle. But this time we've really put a lot into that. We've had our conductors who've been sat spare whilst we haven't been running trains out here, selling tickets, checking tickets, scanning tickets. The bus drivers have been doing their best to check tickets as people get on and off. And we haven't noticed a huge drop in revenue like we had in previous years. So we've done better. There's more we can do, but I think we've done a lot better this time.
But the real success of something like local railway is when all the team buy into the vision. And at Machynlleth, they clearly have. I spoke with Nikki, duty station manager. So Nikki, you've had this blockade for a number of weeks now. It must have been quite disruptive in terms of management. How's the process of that actually worked compared to what it would normally be, just sort of running a railway station?
So this time, this blockade has been fantastic. In the past, we've had Barmouth bridge closure and all sorts of other things. So this is obviously not our first rodeo. But this one has just been really thought out well. They've looked at all the points that passengers could have any problems with, and they've mitigated it as much as they possibly can. The problem with this one is it's changing. So we went from having all trains, all buses, trains and buses, and a mixture of everything. So every day is just very slightly different. But there's been plenty of buses and plenty of people.
In the end, I guess it comes down to the people, doesn't it?
It does. I think we've got some of the toughest ingredients that many other businesses and industries would die for, frankly. We've got huge amounts of pride, passion, and I think that's often in the context of the local part of the railway. The amount of people that say they're proud to work for the railway, we're just trying to exploit that in a way that doesn't just make sense for people in a way in which they can relate to, but actually makes business sense. So if you can use this model many times over and spread around the country, it can create that groundswell, I think, of positivity and real change that customers see and our colleagues prefer working in as well.
Then it was time to go and look at the blockade works themselves. The scale is impressive for a line such as this. Running from the 17th of March to the 2nd of April, the work comprises full track renewal for 2 miles and 10 chains, 8 cess miles of vegetation management, bridge abutment works at Llandovey, rock netting and drainage renewals at Talerthig, level crossing renewal at Buttington. Total cost? £15 million, but the money saved doing it the way they have, £1.8 million. It's a short distance to the track renewal site, but walking on ballast is not easy, and there's always the risk of twisted ankles. So we travelled to the site in style, by gaiter. We walk carefully up the ballast shoulder to the end of the section that is undergoing track renewal, as the gaiter makes its way back. I spoke to Mark Dix. Just give us an idea of what's involved. What's the total scope of work here?
Right, so from conception of this was going to be delivered in about 4 or 5 weekends, from Friday evening through to Monday. However, what was put into the planning process and to become more cost effective, it was decided that a blockade would be put in place, and within that scope of works, the Alliance have carried out 4 sites. So they carried out 2 sites at the station, Machynlleth Down Main and Down Main 2, and also Codol, and the site you're on now is Llangamfechan.
Right.
But in addition to that, what we had to do was integrate our works to maximise the work that was done within the blockade. So we had the maintainer come in, and he's done some devegetation work, which you can see along the track side at the moment. We've also had a company called Amco Giffin who have come in and done a reinstate a bridge repair that was done while we were doing Machynlleth renewal. And then also you've got BAM who are doing netting and putting in rock anchors throughout the route.
And because it's single track, does that mean you need a particular kind of equipment or specialised equipment to cope with the constraint?
It's not any specialised, it's just how you phase the work. For this renewal, it's been Cat 4, which was meant rescarify the ballast, renew the sleepers and renew the rail. Where because it's a single line, you haven't got a train adjacent, so if you had to do a dig, say 250, 300 mil dig, you've got nowhere to put the spoil. So therefore, that limits to what you can do on this route, because you can't go loading up the embankments with spoil, because as we know, with the amount of rainfall that we do have, and landslides and landslips on the track and on the roads, it's an additional loading to the embankment
Sure.
of the track. So we're trying to minimise any impact and and future-proof it, so we don't have any historical issues with landslips.
One of the most extraordinary pieces of equipment I get to see on site are these TRTs, or track rail transposers. They appear to be affectionately known as McCullochs, after the company who manufactures them. They are an absolute boon for moving and placing track, and I watch transfixed as they go about their business, easily moving lengths of rail over 200 metres long, with precision as well as brute force. Mark explained a little bit more about how the track is laid in precisely the correct place.
Part of our sort of planning and preparation for the track renewal is the techs will come out and put in these stakes, and you notice that they've got numbers on. So what that number does is correlates to the drawing. So where on that number there, you'll see a chainage on your drawing. So you know exactly where you are on your drawing for any offsets that you've got to do to then reinstate the existing track from old to new. So the rail, as we see it here, is now going to be sat in the housings. And what you've got is your pad on the bottom, and then a blue and a black on the other side, which is part of the design process. And then you've got your condom on your clip. Okay, and then that provides that you're not earthing out the track anywhere. So you've got continuity for the signalling system throughout the track.
We then watched as a rail-mounted crane, fitted with a specialised device on the front, pushes the track clips into place. The occasional clip needs to be manually adjusted once the machine has passed, but this kind of automation has dramatically improved the efficiency of the task. Gwyn and Mark examine a newly laid and cut piece of rail which has been temporarily clamped, awaiting the arrival of the welder, who will trim the rail joint and then thermit weld it. I genuinely could have stayed for hours just watching the skill and efficient working of all the team involved, but soon our gator arrived for the journey back. On arriving back at where the ballast was stored, Mark explained the need to create this virtual quarry.
We've created a virtual quarry because we had to change our methodology how we delivered it, because we delivered this in a blockade rather than 4 consecutive weekends. So we've got ballast boxes coming up, fill the train up because we've got an auto hopper coming in. So we fill the auto hopper in and it runs down the track and it lays the ballast on the track.
We walk back to the car park to catch the minibus to Machynlleth. And on the station, I have a chance to talk with Colin again, as well as Gwyn Rees, Performance and Transformation Director, Wales Route Network Rail.
So we've been on the looking at the track renewal side, but there's also a lot more stuff going on as well. I mean, would you say this is local railway in action? I mean, I suppose a little bit more detail about what local railway means to you, Gwyn, because I know you're really passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it is. Local railways is all around bringing the decision making and the ownership of how the railway is working for customers right back down to where it belongs effectively. And the blockade was a real example of where we as a local team were looking at a track access strategy for a number of years and challenging ourselves, actually, if we were doing this, could we do it a different way?
Yeah.
On the backdrop of customer feedback, conductor feedback, train crew feedback about the sheer level of weekend after weekend levels of disruption. And actually the staff wanted to do something to make that slightly better. And what local railways does is it gives people the freedom to try and challenge the norm. And it's been really refreshing to see.
Really it is refreshing because boundaries don't seem to matter in quite so much. I'm sure people understand what they've got a clear role, but they're crossing boundaries. I mean, so your colleagues that are involved on the operations side, some of this must be quite new, really.
But it's brilliant. I mean, we've effectively taken the profit and loss for both the infrastructure manager and the operator and put it all together. So you've got people like Di in Gwyn's team normally, who's actually worried about revenue protection. He's a permanent way guy. We've got our conductor managers who are worrying about where should we get a better deal on buying ballast and that kind of thing, or putting together this blockade. So it's been great. We've got some really good examples of litter cleaning, where traditionally we would have sent 2 different vans, a Network Rail one and a TFW one, to the same station. Well, why don't we just send 1 van and then we can use that money more effectively elsewhere?
During the summer months, the coastal route to Barmouth and Clally is just absolutely mad, isn't it? It gets really busy. So wanted to extend the trains, but it's not as straightforward as that. So what have you done and how did local railway help it?
It was almost by accident. We were all sitting in a room together and we were challenging ourselves because some external stakeholder feedback was, why aren't you running 4-car trains up the coast? We always used to, don't do it anymore. And as you were asking people around the room, the local management teams, there were slightly different views as to why we weren't doing it anymore.
Right.
And so actually we started to explore that a little bit further to get to the root of the problem. And there were a series of issues that were preventing us from doing it, but no one absolute. And I think over time, because everybody in their silos, it was, well, it stopped because of the level crossings, or it stopped because there's no stop cart markers. All were true, but none was true.
Yeah.
And if that makes sense. And so by breaking it down and saying, well, actually, if we're the responsible leadership team of this area, and we know that we will make a difference to customers and to revenue if we can do this, why don't we give it a go?
Yeah.
Local railways isn't about the blockade that you've seen. It isn't. The blockade is as a result of whether it's TFW exec or Network Rail exec, giving us the empowerment to challenge and try new things.
Do you think this model is capable of being replicated elsewhere?
It is, subject to a few little caveats, I would say. So the second one is in West Wales and the Harder Wales line, and that's just getting up to speed now. Again, it's Network Rail and TFW. There's a little bit of other operators, but it's mainly us. The third one, which we've just launched back at Christmas, is the North Wales coast, and on that we're bringing Avanti very much into the equation.
See, that one I think is really interesting because parts of Wales, Cambrian, I mean they're wonderful railways, but they're quite local.
Yeah.
The North Wales is a different step, isn't it? I mean, in terms of we've got multiple operators and presumably freight. Is it freight as well?
Yeah.
So that becomes a different order of magnitude. And are you going to have to approach that in a different way, do you think, or is it just a natural learning from what you've done here?
I think it's a natural learning.
Yeah.
You need strong leaders. We need people to take their name badges off at the door. We've done that here in Cambrian. We're doing it well in West Wales, and there's already some really good initiatives coming out of there. And it's early days, but if we can get the right leaders in there who can push things forward, it's really about removing that layer of bureaucracy and getting stuff done safely and appropriately and carefully, but much faster, which you've seen today on the
more
blockade.
cost effectively.
I am constantly amazed to discover just how many brilliant things are underway all over the railway. The local railway initiative here in Wales is one of the best I've seen. I have a real soft spot for leaders like Gwyn, Chris and Colin who do things safely, carefully, with absolute professionalism, but may also perhaps take the view that sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And it's not just them. Everyone I met on my trip clearly buys into the vision of local railway, and it's great to see. I think some of our great railway leaders of the past would be very impressed with what's going on here in Mid Wales. It appears to me, at least, how to run a railway for the benefit of its customers. There will be challenges scaling this model up, and the team here are very aware of that. But if this is a glimpse of what great British railways might look like in the future, then it's a great start.